Are you looking for an easy baby quilt for a quick gift or just a beginner quilter? Follow along and I'll show you how to make this beautiful whole cloth baby quilt in just a few short hours. Let me start by sharing the whole baby set that I made for my new grandson who will be born in April. And the theme of the baby shower, of course, I bet you can't guess, dinosaurs. So with that said, I got to sewing and came up with these ideas here, and I thought I would share them with all of you. I think this is the quickest quilt I've ever made, and it is due to the fact that I found this beautiful blanket at Walmart for the backing, and then the cloth there, the dinosaur cloth, is actually from Walmart as well, back in the fabric section. It's a whole cloth, 44 inches wide, and it came in a 2-yard package for $6. Can you believe it? So I rushed and I bought it because it was perfect for the colors, and went home and decided that I was just going to make it a whole cloth quilt. And then later on I'll show you how to make a different quilt with piecing, but this one's focused on the whole cloth quilt. So I look forward to sharing this with you. So this is the package that the blanket came in. I found this back in the bedding section, and then this is the 2-yard fabric that I was telling you about. So I would encourage you, especially if you're a beginner quilter, to take a look at ways to make your first quilting experience fast, easy, and actually a pleasure to make. I'm actually going to show you how to quilt on a long arm quilting machine, but I have also done these by using my embroidery machine and using the running stitch, a stipple design, or you can even do it free motion quilting on your domestic sewing machine. So there are multiple ways, but this is where I'm starting to show you how to do it on the long arm. Before I actually started rolling on the long arm, I made sure that I pinned my top to the leader cloth at the top, and then also to the bottom leader cloth on the belly bar. And then I started rolling, as you can see here in the video. I would stop several times and make sure that my blanket was going on smooth and even. So you'll notice that there's a couple of curls, so I would stop and then reorganize. Now my backing is all rolled up on the frame. I have a Q-Zone Queen rolling frame from Grace and a 16 Elite Unique long arm, and I absolutely love quilting with it. I've only been quilting for a couple months with my long arm, and I don't know what took me so long to buy it. But before that, I did quilt with my embroidery machine, and then also free motioned on my domestic sewing machine. Next, I wanted to prep my fabric, so I gave it a nice, good press before putting it on the long arming machine. So my first step is to draw a straight line, or I should say stitch a straight line across the top of my backing. And I did this by just going across with a basting stitch all the way across. And the reason that I know that it's straight is that I have my channel locks on, so that it can only go from left to right but not up and down, so therefore it's a perfectly straight line. And you'll even hear it beep once. That means I'm going too fast, so my machine knows when I need to slow down and take my time. So next I put my top fabric on, and I lined it up with the top of the stitch line that I just made, and now I'm stitching down right on the very edge of the top of the quilt. So that way I can have a nice straight top line. I also stitched down, basted down the sides of my quilt on both sides. So here's where I get a little creative. I usually have those long clamps that I put on my rails to make my fabric taut, and it won't work this time because the minky on the back is way too thick, the blanket. So I thought I would add a little pressure to hold it tight just by putting some straight pins in, and it worked. To my surprise, I was a little bit worried that my fabric would gather and I wouldn't end up with a nice blanket, but when in doubt, just try out to be creative, and luckily pinning worked for me, and it did remind me to go on Amazon though and buy some clips. So I got some bigger clips, so hopefully the next time it will work with clips. When I got my new quilting machine, I also purchased the Creative Quilter's Touch 6, and I have the basic edge to edge, the bottom tier, and I love it. It is an automated edge to edge quilting. It's just like a big embroidery machine. And you can see here I got it started and it's running on its own. I picked the design and it's that simple and that easy. I think the setup in the beginning is the hardest part. It takes the longest, and it's not really hard, it's just the longest part. But as I said before, if you don't have a long arm, the machine that you see off to my right shoulder there, that's my embroidery machine, and I had a magnetic hoop, and I would do the exact same thing, but I only had an 8x8 hoop, and I would just rehoop my fabric every 8 inches and quilt on it through the embroidery machine. And then before I learned how to do it on my embroidery machine, I would just do free motion quilting on my domestic. And talk about time and effort. That was time and effort. So I'm so happy I'm at this point. Now here you can see, I have perfect stitches, but you can see the backing coming up through. That is unavoidable when you use a soft backing like this. It will come up through your stitches, but once the baby quilt is washed, those will ease their way back down and it'll be just fine. And in fact, I don't even think it looks that bad. But that's just something I can't avoid. So after a couple hours of quilting, I took the baby blanket off of the long arm and made my binding. I have 2.5-inch strips. The baby quilt was 44 by 44, so I made enough strips to go around the quilt. I think I cut 5 of them just so I would have extra to make it all the way around. I sewed my strips together with a 45-degree angle, and then I ironed it in half as shown here. I use a toilet paper holder, one of those long stands, and I wrap my binding around it, and then I take it over to my quilt and start sewing on my quilt. It is so easy to use this way rather than throwing it over my shoulder and getting all tangled up in the binding. And here I'm just showing you how, I just sew along the edge at 1/4 inch. Since this is not a binding tutorial or anything like that, I thought I would just give you a quick glance of how I do it. I do have 1/4 inch there, and then I sew off the edge. and then I fold it back over at a right angle. I sew all the way around till I get to the beginning of my quilt, and this is how I do my binding. I put it in this little pocket and I fold it over, and then I just sew straight down. It's that easy. Next, I take the blanket over to my ironing board and I turn it backside up and I iron the binding so that it has a nice crisp edge there. And then next I take Elmer's glue, the clear washable kind, and I just do a light edge of glue on that 1/4 inch area there that I sewed. You can see the stitch line. And here you can see the little dabs of glue. It's kind of hard to see because it's clear. But I do that, so I'm pointing the glue out right there. I go maybe 12 inches, and then I start to fold over, and then I press it with the iron. And here I'm showing you how I fold it over. My hand's in the way though, so I apologize, but I take my pointer finger and put it in there, and then I take my my middle finger, see my pointer finger going in? It's got glue on it, so I have to be careful, and then my middle finger, I press down on the binding. I almost touched it with my pointer finger, and then I iron it down. Then I make sure I miter my corners, and I iron those down. And I tell you, this used to be so hard for me in the very beginning, and I'm sure all my beginner quilters out there know my grief over this, but it just takes practice and time, and then eventually you'll get it. Next, it's time to top stitch the binding on the front of the quilt, and I'm showing you I changed my presser foot there. I have the wide-toed presser foot on, and my needle is clear to the left. This is the back side. It looks so nice and crisp and clean. And you're done. Want to learn how to make the pieced quilt or the baby items pictured here? Stick around, like and subscribe, and I'll be uploading more videos. Hope you enjoyed this one.